Working drummer.
Now kick it.
This is the Working Drummer Podcast, serving up perspectives, experiences, and stories from ground-level working pros. Advice, tips, and secrets on how to build a career in the music business.
Hey everybody, this is Matthew Crouse, and you are listening to the podcast Working Drummer. Today we're going to try something fun. In this episode, my co-host Zack Albetta and I have a unique opportunity to join forces with Nick Ruffini from Drummer's Resource. We take a little bit of a break from the normal guests that we have on, and we have another roundtable of sorts with myself and Zack and Nick. All three of us have been going through some major life changes. I'm sure most of you or all of you know Nick Ruffini from Drummer's Resource. Early on in this podcast, I reached out to Nick for advice, and he's been awesome and just a good resource, no pun intended, for our podcast. And through Nick, I was able to connect with Zack, and he's been a part of the team here, which has been awesome. To find out more about this episode and all the episodes we've done, you can find every episode from 1 to over 100 on workingdrummer.net. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can subscribe to us on iTunes, and while you're there, please leave a rating and review. That helps us grow. Hey folks, can we talk snare drums real quick? Dreamy, loud, bright, poppy, clean, articulate snares, and well, do you believe at love at first sight? Okay, first sound. Well, before I get into all that, let me tell you, the folks at KHS America invited me back out to their place to experience a few new snare drums they launched at Winter NAMM. And the drum I fell in love with, I was mentioning, it's one of the new Mapex Black Panther Design Lab series snares. It's called the Heartbreaker, a 14x6 8-ply mahogany shell with reinforcement rings. I could instantly hear the possibilities with this drum, and our friends at KHS America allowed me to take this drum on a test drive. I've used it live and in the studio, and let me just say, it got noticed. Punchy yet warm, it never lost its beautiful tone, even as I tuned it lower and lower. The other snares in this line include the Cherry Bomb, an 8-ply cherry wood precise sounding snare, available in 14x6 or 13x5.5, and the Equinox, a 14x5 6-ply maple snare that's described as classic, bright, and articulate. Yes, all true. Some of the shared features of these four drums are the Pure Sound snares and the Micro Lock, cylinder drive with the butt end adjuster, and English Matt. Okay, you know that little click-click you feel on the throw that keeps the snares in place? That's what I'm talking about. In the very near future on this podcast, we are going to sit down and talk with Russ Miller and get the backstory on these snares, as well as some very interesting developments coming your way through the Black Panther Design Lab line of instruments. You're going to want to hear this. So here's the podcast host roundtable with myself, Zack Albetta, and Nick Ruffini from Drummer's Resource. Enjoy. I'm going to dive in right away because Zack had the idea of kind of discussing these transitions that we're going through as subject material because I think it's relatable. And I thought that was a great idea because all three of us are in different stages of this massive life change, geographically and whatever. And
I've done it twice in the last 3 years. Too.
Oh my God. So, one of the things that I've been doing to kind of to change my life from being on the road to being at home is you have to juggle so many things to make stuff happen. And one of the things is to try and promote some online tracking. So I got my first session yesterday. It came through.
Sweet.
From Germany.
Nice.
Yeah, I'm real excited. And
are you doing the air gigs thing?
Yeah. So this duo from Germany sent me this track, and they said, hey, we want this country train beat on here like you do, and here's a video of kind of what we're looking for. So they send me to this link of somebody doing an instructional video of a train beat, and it's awful.
You're like, do you want me to play it like that, or do you want me to play it correctly?
It's like, thank you for calling me. I'm glad that, I'm not going to say anything, but I'm like, okay, if that's their standard, get ready.
I'm going to knock it out.
I've been doing train beats for at least 15 years.
Right.
So what was the process of like creating a profile on Air Gigs? And you have like your home recording rig for a while, right?
Actually, not too terribly long. I haven't. Most of the examples that I have, I think I have 12 examples through SoundCloud that they have an app that you can do a link there for SoundCloud. Also a video. I have a video linked to a session that I did last year. And so it just gives examples, but there's only one that has the sounds that I've gotten at home. Ironically, and that's one of the tracks we're using on the podcast. But it's just more of an example of my playing. As I do more and as I produce more of the tracks that we've already done here at home at my house, I'll put those on there. But to set up on air gigs was super easy. There are lots of people on it, but there's lots of examples to go by. So It was a pretty quick process. And that's one of the other things is linking that to now a personal website that I did. And again, I think a lot of people think that this stuff is intimidating, and it's not. You just got to sit down, take a couple hours, and get started. And even if you just set a just do it. If it's not 100% complete, just tweak it along the way and then let people know. That's the hardest thing, is just getting started.
Dude, and done is better than perfect, you know?
Yep. I believe that.
Go ahead.
Well, this reminds me of Matt, the interview you did about a month ago with Hubert Payne, and he was talking about getting his recording rig together at home, and how he expressed this kind of trepidation that I think we all feel, which is it's not worth tackling that kind of thing until you have a bunch of money and a bunch of expertise. Yeah. But he said, I didn't have much money at all. I didn't have much expertise at all. I just started buying a couple of mics and screwing around with them.
It's like starting a podcast.
Yeah,
totally. Like none of us knew how to do a podcast before we started it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
right.
And Nick, we'll definitely get to your big transition here in a second. But Matt, this is an example of something that you can't really do if you're spending a lot of time on the road.
Right.
Like to cultivate a clientele doing recording at home. You got to be at home. So this transition you're going through is that you and your wife recently decided that like you're not going to spend as much time on the road. You're going to be at home more with the family and work in Nashville more.
Yeah. Exactly. And that's what I did. I mean, I moved here in late 99 and made my living working in Nashville. And then as of 5 years ago, the band I was working with was just finding a lot of work on the road. And we made decision year by year to kind of go ahead and stick it out. But I'm older than you guys. My kids are 11 and 14, and I'm missing too much. And after just struggling with it personally, and then a conversation with my wife, and she's like, I can't do this anymore. And I'm like, I can't either.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think. So
are you going to do less touring or less? Because I know you were doing a lot of cruise stuff too, which is like when you're doing cruises, you're out there. You can't even communicate barely.
This was a unique situation. This band was doing land gigs and cruise gigs, where we would fly onto a cruise ship and play for 3 days, do one night of shows, but be out on the cruise for 3 or 4 days as a headlining act, not as one of the musical acts on the cruise that has a 6 to 9 month contract.
I got you.
Yeah, so we were, but it would take me. Either, no matter how you slice it, whether it was land shows or whatever, I was away from Nashville. I was away from my family. I was away from the music business community. And I'm sorry, guys. I know I'm talking so much right now at the top, but I'll shut my mouth soon.
No, go for it.
This week, I can tell you, this week, like today, I have a live show. Tonight, I'm going to record that track. Last week, I had 2 days of recording. I had a rehearsal that a friend of mine, now that I'm in town, I'm available, and I let them know that I'm in town. So he's like, okay, I'm working with a producer who's developing a new young artist. We want to rehearse and start developing his show to do showcases and to get him up to speed to do live shows. And then they're going to push a single and get him out on the road, and then probably hire a touring band. But we're like the artist developing band. So what I'm saying is I had a chance to have a great rehearsal with a prominent producer who knows all these wonderful drummers, Kenny Aronoff and Matt Chamberlain, and all these great players, Shannon Forrest, all these great guys in Nashville who worked on the record, and meet a 27-year-old upcoming songwriter who was just amazing. So in 1 week, I'm like, this is great.
Yeah.
Now,
That's awesome.
If I can pay my bills doing all that stuff, that's going to be the end result. But if it's not, non-music gigs may be a part of the equation. And you know what? I welcome it. I'm excited just about being in one place and being close to family. So
There's two things that you said that sort of stuck out. One was the fact that now that you're in town, and so many times for people who are on the road a lot, whether you're home or not, it's like, oh, let's call Matt. Nah, he's probably on the road. Let's call Jim. Yep. And you don't even come to the top of mind, not because they don't want you to play, but they're like, oh, he's always on the road, so let's just not call him because he's probably not here.
Even
which
if
may
I'm
or may not be the case.
Right.
You know?
Right.
And the second thing was how I love the fact that you were like, and some non-music gigs may play into this. And I put out a podcast a couple of weeks ago about changing the narrative of what it means to be a professional musician, because I don't have an issue, and I don't think other people should have an issue with doing non-music related gigs. It's like people wear it like a badge of honor and say, oh, all I do is play music for a living. It's like, okay, that's cool, but you make $200 a week. So like, why not? So you can struggle and wear this badge of honor, or you can go out, get a day gig, make money, and fund all the stuff that you want to do. Like Chase Jarvis, he's the creator of or the CEO of Creative Live. One thing he said when I interviewed him, he said, I don't make art to make money. I make money so I can make more art. And I thought that was great. I just love the fact that you said that, because it's like, yeah, all right, if I have to go do these other things, I still get to play music. So why not like go do these other things while I'm not playing music, make more money, and then invest it into more gear and not have to, then you can pick and choose your gigs and all. I don't know. I think it's like it's all about freedom.
And the middle ground between, playing drums for a living and having a non-music gig is, a bunch of the stuff that we're doing and a bunch of people I know are doing. It's like music related, but not playing. You can write, you can do a podcast, you can teach, there are a lot of gigs that you can do that are still, you still have your hands and your mind in music.
And let's face it, like the days of being a session guy and, making $300,000 a year are gone.
Yeah.
It's just not, not that you need to make $300,000, but like, guys like what's his name?
Eddie Bears was making six figures all through the 90s and into the 2000s for sure.
Like Hal Blaine had a yacht and a Rolls Royce.
He was making millions, never mind 300,000. It was like,
those days are gone. So and even guys at the top of the food chain are still doing all of these other things too. They're doing clinics, they're doing speaking engagements, they're teaching, they're doing all this other stuff. It's like you have to have multiple irons in the fire.
Yeah.
I struggled with that.
We can't all be on Law and Order like Rich Redmond or whatever he's doing.
Right.
Man, I struggled with that. Just that perception issue.
Me too, Matt.
Me
too, Matt.
And I think
not to cut you off, but I'm with you, man. Like lost sleep over it, like depression, like I get it.
It's time to let it go. And I tell you, there was an inspirational talk I had, and his name is escaping me. And Nick, I think you've had him on the show recently. Steve Bowman, who was the drummer for Counting Crows. He played on the first record, August and Everything After. I mean, I loved that record. And it's
my favorite record of all time.
Yeah, I played along with it, man. I mean, Steve is such a sweetheart, and he moved to Nashville, and I ran into him at the airport, and I said, I'd love to have you on the show, man. And he goes, hey, just so you know, I'm not a full-time drummer anymore. Like, after the flood in Nashville, he had to spend a lot of extra money to keep his property intact. And he goes, I'm doing this other job. It's my full-time job. I said, okay, that's it. You are going to be on the show. I want you to talk about this. And I got a lot of very positive response from that, because in the current climate, the way music is, the way the economy is, the way life is, you really have to shape things around. And unlike you guys, my kids trump everything.
Of course.
You know? So,
of course.
Yeah.
And you know, like what's wrong with that? But let me rewind a little bit, because I don't want to be in the business of telling people, hey, give up on your music dreams and go get a day gig and just play on the weekends.
Right.
That's not what I'm saying. I think for me, it's a matter of balance and finding your happiness. So I don't want to be on the road, for 3 years in a row. I don't want to. Sure, would I like to play with Justin Timberlake? I'd love to.
Mm-hmm.
I'd love to play with Bruno Mars. I'd love to play with John Mayer.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't want to lose 3 years of my life at home and then come home and not have too much to show for it. But other people may be completely happy with that. So it's all about happiness and what's right for you. But I don't think that using someone else as the barometer of what you should be doing in your own life is a surefire way to be unhappy and to not win.
Yeah. And I think the other thing all three of us have in common, especially in terms of, kind of shedding the ego-related badge of only playing for a living, is that we're all married to amazing, supportive women who want us to play as much as we can.
Sure.
But at the same time, being in that marriage, I think I'll just speak for myself. Being married to Christina has made me want to hold up my end in whatever way I have to and make good on the investments that she's made in me, whether they're financial or emotional or whatever. It's not that she's, standing there with her arms crossed, like, when are you going to make some money? It's like, it's coming from within me. Like, I need to do right by this woman, When
I first moved up to New York, I wasn't even married at the time. We were just dating. And it was a weird transitional point in my life, and I was like, I just left the restaurant business with my family and all that stuff, and she was like, you can just come up here and live here, and I'll sort of take care of because she had a really good job. She's like, I'll take care of everything while you just figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
And I was like, wow, that's I was like, I'm not gonna do that, but she was like, you can come up here and live in the apartment for free, don't worry about any of that, I'll take care of stuff and you can just figure out this music stuff. And I was like, that's just the gesture. I was like, wow, that's a pretty awesome gesture. But
I better start learning her likes and dislikes and her middle name. Man, this woman seems amazing.
She is amazing. But I was like, I'll figure out whatever I have to do in the interim through this transition. And that's really what we're talking about here, is like the transitions that we go through, and, learning about, like Matt, you were saying, like going through, coming to terms with, I may have to do some other side stuff, or, I may not just make my money touring. And inside of those things, you find all this other stuff. Like, I knew that I didn't want to tour, started the podcast and everything, but now I'm actually learning that I love a lot of the music business stuff too.
Yes. Yeah.
And really enjoy that stuff.
Yeah.
And there's a big difference between the drumming business and the music business.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And for a while, I was kind of like burned out on the drumming business, and was like, but I really love the music. I love music. I love playing. I love creating. I love listening, and I like being a part of that. And then it kind of like clicked one day. I was like, I like the music business and the music industry more than I enjoy the drumming business. And it kind of came full circle and made me like fall in love with the drumming business again. And like, it's weird, man. It's weird how all this stuff works.
And that doesn't mean that you can't pick up your sticks. That means you can't spend time behind the kit and do those things.
Yeah.
Right.
You don't have to be Lance Armstrong to not enjoy riding bikes and working at a bike store and doing all those things. I think all of it comes together, and participating in the podcast, creating podcasts and being a fan of podcasts has been really helpful in making this transition for me and coming to terms with not being the possibility of not being a full-time player as a way of making my income. Because I hear so many stories of those who are balancing it, like Steve Bowman's, as well as the tough stories and the realities of being on the road through my experience of interviewing one-on-one and listening to podcasts like yours, Nick. And that has been super helpful to me, and hopefully it's somewhat therapy for people that are interested in what we're doing.
And it's eye-opening. You start to realize that
you're not alone.
The people that we talk to are mortal. They're not gods. They have they have issues. They have some have money problems. Some don't. Some are doing great. Some aren't. And you talk to some people and you're like, oh wow, you're actually doing a lot better than I thought you were. Or some other people that maybe aren't doing as well as you thought. Or I think it for me with the podcast, to your point, opened my eyes to say, okay, there's some things that I didn't really understand about, being a full-time musician. There were some things that I thought were true that are not. There are something, and I mean good and bad. But it was just a really eye-opening experience. And then I was, and who the person who did it for me was Billy Martin from Medeski, Martin & Wood. Mm-hmm. And he totally changed my entire thought process about it. And he was like, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether you are drumming full time, whether you work for a record label and you play one night a week, or whether you own a record label and you never play, or you work at Starbucks and you have a gig on the weekend. He was like, who cares? Like, if you love it and you're happy, then it shouldn't matter to anyone else.
Yeah.
That's all that matters. Yeah. And I don't know what it was, but like after that conversation, my life has never been the same.
That's great. Those are great. Those are great moments.
Yeah.
So Nick, tell us about the big move that you're about to make and how that's going to affect your podcast and your playing and your whole life.
So Zack is the moderator. He's assumed the role.
He is. I want to hear Zack talking a little bit.
I know.
I'll jump in there. We're going to talk about working into a new city, and then I'll.
And it's funny. I was just telling my wife about it, about how well you did it, but it was super impressive to watch because it was very quick. So we're definitely going to talk about it.
Okay, thank you.
So. Let me give you a little bit of backstory. I live in New York. Well, I live in the New York area. I live in Hoboken now. So I'm literally like right across the river from Manhattan. I'm about a 5-minute train ride. But I moved from the Philadelphia area up to here 4 years ago. So I've done this relocation thing once, and now I'm about to do it again. We're moving to the San Francisco area. But when I moved up here, it was a really weird situation because I was working and playing. I just put out my record, and I was playing a lot, but I was also running my family's restaurant with them. So I would go on the road and I would come home, and I had like this fallback thing where I could just go and bartend and work in the restaurant, and it was great. And I was making a ton of money, and things were amazing. All of that fell apart within a matter of like a week and a half. And then there was like, not to get too deep, but there was all these crazy legal battles, and then blah, 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 blah. So then we opened up another restaurant, took all my money, me, my brother, and my dad. I took all the money that I had, sunk it into this restaurant. And the restaurant didn't do well in the beginning. It got better, then it got worse, and then we ended up selling it. So long story short, I moved up here. My life savings was invested in this restaurant. I didn't have a job up here and was trying to figure out what I was going to do. And I started Drummers Resource, and then in the beginning, I was trying to do everything. I was trying to grow Drummers Resource. I was trying to get gigs. I was trying to help a buddy of mine run this drumstick company. And I was just like, I can't do everything. I cannot do everything. And I really want to make Drummers Resource work. So I purposely was like, I'm not going to pursue gigs in the New York area. I'm just going to focus on Drummers Resource. Coincidentally, now, 2017, I'm really at a point where Drummers Resource is like firing on all cylinders. It's rocking and rolling. It's taken a lot less grind time, as I like to call it. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, okay, now I'm ready to start playing out again. I'm ready to start gigging. I'm ready to start touring. Maybe not long tours, but I'd like to do like some short runs here and there again. And so now I'm moving to San Francisco. So I'm going to be making another transition, one, moving to the West Coast, but two, making the transition of keeping Drummers Resource running, but not having to focus every single minute of my day on it. So now I can start gigging again. So it's going to be really interesting that I'm having the time now to be able to do this, but I'm actually going to be doing it in a brand new city too. So I think it's going to be like a really fresh start. It's going to be, a bit of a challenge, obviously, but an exciting one.
And like my move to Atlanta, your move to San Francisco is being brought about by your badass wife getting a badass job.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. If it were me, I would say I want to go to LA.
Mm-hmm.
But then at the same time, like the San Francisco area is so beautiful, and I'm just like, I'm really excited about it. I wouldn't have chosen to go to San Francisco. Mm-hmm. But now that we're going, I'm really, really excited about it.
Dude, it was the same thing with Atlanta. Like, Atlanta was not on my radar in any sort of way. And my wife came to me. She was like, so I got a call from this company, and she was talking up the company and the job. And I was like, this sounds amazing. What? And she was like, well, it's in Atlanta. And I was like, okay.
You're like, Atlanta, okay.
Yeah, but I mean, the more we learned about it, the more we visited, I learned about the music scene. Like, it became something that I got really excited about.
Right. I think the one thing that sold me too, I found out that the town that I'm moving to is where David Garibaldi lives.
Yeah. So there's something in the water, man.
I was like, hey, man, I'm thinking about moving there. Like, what's it like? And he was like, there's a great music scene here. There's a ton of great players. Oakland is here. San Fran's here. He was like, you'll love it. So
sounds great,
like,
man.
Cool. That'll work.
It sounds like
a word of caution. I think the locals don't like the term San Fran. I think it's like they say SF or they say the city, but I think if you say San Fran, they're like, oh.
That's like here. I don't say I'm going to New York. I just say I'm going to the city.
Right.
Yeah.
Where do you work? I work in the city.
Yeah, I don't go to.
You can't say I work in New York. They're like, all right, you're not from around here.
I don't go to New Orleans and say, hey guys, how's New Orleans here?
Yeah.
Just don't say that. Well, Nick,
I love it here in New Orleans.
New Orleans. So, Nick, it sounds like there's some parallels between the restaurant business and creating the podcast. I mean, in many ways, you have to work and work and work, and then all of a sudden it takes on a life of its own and starts to operate, you know what I mean, on its own, where you can kind of take a step back. It's an operation. I think that's where we've been recently, the last 6 months or so with Working Drummer, where it's kind of, if all we did was submit the interviews, I feel like things would steadily grow. But that's the last thing I'll say about my move, is the chance to reinvest and put some more efforts into the podcast where it needs it, the way where you were a couple years ago. So that's an exciting thing.
Yeah, and I'm excited about the fact that just playing more too, so it'll sort of help me, go through some of the struggles, so I can use that for content for Drummers Resource and everything. But there's no way the Drummers Resource would be where it is now had I been playing and touring and doing this and doing that, So I'm glad that I did it. It's kind of sad now because we're leaving New York, but I never really felt like New York was my town. I love it here, but I never felt like it was my town in terms of gigging and playing.
Interesting.
That was another thing I wanted to ask you about, Nick, is because like one of the differences between our two podcasts is that you basically for a couple of years you made Drummers Resource your full-time job, and that's something that Matt and I have been unable and unwilling to do because we're playing, we're teaching, but you made the choice to just focus completely on that.
Right.
So now you're looking at a period now where you're going to be able to take some focus off the podcast and put it back on playing and getting out there and being a musician too.
Yeah, I don't want to say taking focus off the podcast. Mm-hmm. I think that it's not as time consuming. It's not going to be as time consuming as it once was because it wasn't. You're always in growth mode, like Matt said. You always want to reinvest and keep building. But now it's starting to get legs. Mm-hmm. So it takes, I don't want to say it takes less effort because I don't want to make it sound like I just like sit around all day and like all this stuff just magically happens.
It takes constant attention.
But it's sort of like it just doesn't take as much grind time. Like it doesn't need 12, 14 hours a day anymore.
Right. Right.
So I'm not taking my focus. I'm very hesitant to say that because I was on a couple other podcasts talking about how I'm interested in like doing some other things, maybe even starting another podcast, starting another business and all this stuff. And people were saying, well, are you not interested in doing Drummers Resource anymore? Or do you not love it anymore? And that is not the case at all. I love it as much as I've always have, and I wanted to keep growing and get bigger and expand the content and all that. But I have other interests and I like other things too. So it's in addition to Drummers Resource, not taking it away from Drummers Resource.
Right.
Yeah.
So what are you looking at as far as like working your way into the San Francisco scene or the Oakland scene or just that region?
I'm going to go out there. I'm going to, talk to David Garibaldi, see what he recommends. My buddy Jeff Campbell is a singer, songwriter out there. He actually won the Guitar Center singer-songwriter competition a couple of years ago. He's a great musician, pretty well connected. He's from my hometown, so we've played together for years, and he's out there. So I'm going to sort of get in with him, see where that can lead. And his drummer Rick Munoz is there too. So I'm going to connect with him. There's some other people that I know who live out there that I can just kind of say, hey, I'm in the area. And then I'm going to, put boots on the ground and figure out what I got to do to really get into that scene. Yeah. And I'm interested. I actually wanted to talk to you about it too. I'm interested to know what you did in Atlanta. I mean, I remember you were like, hey, I'm moving to Atlanta. And next thing I know, like 3 weeks later, you're like, oh, gig number 37 in Atlanta. I'm like, the dude, I don't even think he lives in Atlanta yet. He's gigging in Atlanta already.
It wasn't quite that quick, but
it was gig 35.
Right. Yeah, it was 35. No, I took a lot of lessons from my time in LA, and I think I talked about this in the interview I did with Matt for our podcast. There were some ways that I didn't really go about things the right way in LA, and I think it mostly had to do with persistence. I didn't show up often enough in the same places to really develop some deep relationships with people. And it wasn't until I lived there for 3 or 4 years really that I formed a couple of really deep friendships and deep musical relationships, most notably with the organist and keyboardist Ty Bailey and vibraphonist Nick Mancini. They're still my good buddies, and we played a lot together. But coming to Atlanta, I just, had the mindset that I have to be out all the time, not every night, but like 3-4 nights a week. So, my wife and I both just kind of got ready for that undertaking. And there were a lot of nights when I didn't really feel like going out, when, I was on the couch and comfy and, or when money was a little tight and I didn't want to spend money just going to buy beers at somebody's gig, Right. But there was a lot of just getting out and seeing people and meeting people.
I want to interject real quick. I'm sorry to cut you off, but that's sort of when I moved up here. That was another thing. Like money was tight, and it's not cheap to go out in New York to see bands.
Right.
Like there's a lot of great music out here, but it's $100 night. No questions.
Oh my God. Yeah.
You know what I mean? You can't just go in and like grab a drink and leave. It's like 2 drink minimum. Like if you're going to stay for both sets, you got to pay, you got to have a 2 drink minimum per set. So it's
right.
It's not cheap, but go ahead. Sorry.
Well, that's one of the reasons that I think it was easier for me, at least psychologically, if not practically, in Atlanta, because in LA it's oftentimes not cheap to go out, but there's also traffic, man, and unlike Nashville or New York, there isn't kind of a centralized location in LA for live music. You might have to drive down to Orange County or up to North Hollywood or over to Santa Monica, and no matter what time of day it is, it just is a pain in the ass. Right. I think that's what kept me in a lot of nights when I should have been out in LA. But Christina gave me really good advice at the beginning of our time in Atlanta, because she, like, when I went out in LA, she would kind of see my mindset about, like, okay, I'm going to this place to meet this person, and I hope to get this and that out of it. She would see how I would hope to come back with something to show for my trip. Right. In terms of hustling and networking. But she told me, when we get to Atlanta, just go out and hear music. Just be a listener. Don't feel like you gotta hustle and network at every opportunity, and don't feel like you have to meet specific people at a specific place. Like, just go where the current takes you in Atlanta. Go hear some music that you're really into. Go discover some new musicians that you're really into, and just kind of appreciate the scene for what it is. A lot of the credit goes to just the Atlanta scene itself and the musicians there. They were just so welcoming and really positive about me being there. Like, even other drummers were like, "Man, I'm so glad you're here. We need you here. We need you on the scene." So it's really a credit to Atlanta and the musicians there. A lot of them really helped me get going.
So where do you go to find a treasure trove of information about vintage drums, custom drums, and legendary drummers? NotSoModernDrummer.com. Since 1988, Not So Modern Drummer is an institution dedicated to researching and documenting the history of modern drums, the art of drum building, and the legendary drummers who play them. The writers and contributors are some of the top vintage and custom drum experts from around the world. Not So Modern Drummer serves as an online gathering place and marketplace for the worldwide community of drummers who buy and sell, collect, preserve, and play these instruments. It also hosts drum-related events that are attended by drummers from all over the world. This website is easy and fun to explore, and the monthly digital magazine subscription is free. So check out NotSoModernDrummer.com.
You and I had a conversation that I thought was interesting about the difference between Atlanta and LA, and the difference of people. No one in LA, well, I shouldn't say no one, but a large majority of the people in LA are not looking for gigs in LA.
Right.
They're looking for touring. But in Atlanta, you're able to sort of get into this local scene that is sort of self-sustaining, that you could theoretically play there forever.
Right. Would you say most cities are like that?
Say what, Matt?
It sounds like most, with few exception, New York, Nashville, LA, I think it would be safe to say that most cities are like that.
Yeah.
Well, the town that I grew up in, Westchester, Pennsylvania, has a great music scene. Not as good as it was, but it's still really, really good. But years ago, you could walk down the street and there's, 10, 15, 20 bars with live music, and there's a scene there that you could theoretically play, Friday and Saturday night. You can play every single weekend and rotate through the same, 25 or 30 bars, and you could do that forever. I know guys that are still playing, the first Friday of the month and have been for literally 15 years.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that I enjoyed that, because you come home, like I would go out on the road. There's, I would play however long I was on the road, but then I would come home and there was gigs at home. There was that local scene. Everyone knew who I was. I was connected, and it's great. It becomes like a family. So then when you need a hi-hat clutch and you just call the guy down the street and you're like, "Hey, John, I need a hi-hat clutch." And it's like, "Cool, I'll bring it over." "Oh, I'll leave my kit here for you to play tomorrow," whatever it is. But that local scene is hard in LA.
Yeah. And, It's
like a fly-by-night scene.
It's kind of, it's not that kind of thing doesn't exist in LA, but it's just it's a little harder to find and harder to tap into, and I think you have to put more time in LA to kind of find that than you do in Atlanta, because like we had, within a few months of Atlanta, within a few months of being in Atlanta, I already had, more friends and colleagues. Well, not more, but as many friends and colleagues as I did in LA. And it's just because LA has such a short attention span. Everybody's kind of go, go, go. What's next? What's the next step up? What's the, and that's not a knock on LA. That's just kind of what the city runs on. But like I think your point is that a city like Atlanta is sustainable. The scene there can sustain a lot of musicians, and the ceiling might not be quite as high as it is in a place like New York or LA. There are just some opportunities that exist in New York, Nashville, and LA that simply do not exist in other cities. But I've found Atlanta to be kind of the best of both worlds. I mean, I was in LA for 5 years, and before that, I was in Kansas City for 7 years. And I've found Atlanta to be kind of the happy medium between the two. It has a really vibrant local scene, and it's easy to find your tribe. Similar to Kansas City. But similar to LA, Atlanta it's a big enough city. It's an international hub. It's kind of hooked into the rest of the world. And there are opportunities to do a lot of stuff other than just playing on the local scene. And even if those opportunities don't come up very often or at all, like you said, the local scene itself is vibrant and cool and high quality enough that it can sustain you.
Right. That's one of the things I'm excited about with San Francisco is that there is that scene there, that San Francisco, Oakland, that area. And I can go to LA, I could do the music business stuff that I really want to do, but then also come home to this local scene. And if I get some gigs out of LA, that's great too. But I think that I may have found the best of both worlds.
Yeah. Matt, I'm curious about your kind of re-entry into Nashville, because it's almost like you're working your way into a new city.
I'm the prodigal son.
He has returned.
Okay, everyone, give me your gigs now. I'm home. That's all I said.
I'm back for my gigs.
I'm back for my road gig. I've ignored you. I've been out making money. Now I need to make some money with you.
Right.
One thing I wanted to say about some of the things that you learn, Zach, is that no matter what city you are in across the country or probably across the world, is just this genuine approach to networking. And I think that was a really good advice from Christina, was you can smell when someone is just looking for a gig, or as we say in Nashville, gurming,
right,
where you're just trying to just schmooze with somebody, and there isn't a genuine, it doesn't mean that they have to be your best friend and everything, but there isn't a genuine relationship that's established. And so coming back to Nashville, it's not like I'm new to the scene. I've been here for 16 years. People know that I'm here, and through social media, you're able to kind of keep your presence known. And yet, in Nashville, people know that when you're on the road, even if you are sitting at home, you're like, oh, don't call him, he's on the road. And then people just stop calling you all together. You move further down the list before long, you're off the list. And I think that's kind of where I'm at. I'm almost at the bottom end of many people's lists because they've moved on. And so now it's like I've paid careful attention to how I message people to let them know that I'm in town. And I try and make it a personal message to them. I take a little time every night to send out at least 2 or 3 to people that I've worked with in different capacities, live or in the studio or whatever, just to say, hey, I just want to let you know I've left my gig, I'm in town, I really enjoyed working with you last summer, or that was a good thing. I'm trying to put some pieces together, but it would be great to meet. And then I'm to be very genuine about it. Like, I don't have a whole lot of time, but I have mornings free, and if you want to do breakfast together, or if you want to grab coffee, I live in this part of town, and I know you live in that part of town, and there's a great coffee place, and I'm going to be over there. Some of those things, I'm just trying to be real careful to not become white noise to so many people that are saying, hey, I need a gig, or I need this, or I'm back in town, because that happens a lot. For many reasons, people are coming off the road or they're moving to town, and just to try and make it about the relationships. And guys, again, I feel like I've learned. I mean, we've all been doing this. We've all been working in the music business for so long, but I'm constantly having revelations through different podcasts and through my own interviews, and I'm so thankful for it. I feel like I'm armed with some information that is useful in making these social connections, because that's what it's about. And like you say, man, being consistent with showing up in the same places and knowing what you're getting into, and kind of being a little bit more, I don't say selective, but making I feel like this is almost a do-over for me, where I know the pitfalls, and I want to be smart about it so that I'm spending my time wisely. That creates a happy life, a happy environment, and it doesn't, because somebody's like, there might be this road gig, but you don't want to go back on the road. I'm like, absolutely not.
Yeah.
You know?
And the idea of being selective really kind of struck a chord with me just now, because I feel like in LA, in terms of networking, I cast my net really wide and not very deep. And coming to Atlanta, I think I put more of an emphasis on forming fewer relationships, but deeper relationships.
Sure. Depth, man. Depth is, I think depth is so much more important.
Yeah. So on a given night, like in my first few months of being there, it was like, okay, I can go to this new place and meet this guy I haven't met yet, or I can go to this other place for the third time and hang out with that dude for the third time. And I often chose to do the latter, and I think it's paid off with a number of personal and musical relationships that I have now in Atlanta that I really value.
One of the things that you guys mentioned is being selective, and that has always been the driving force behind Drummer's Resource, because I don't want to do things that I don't want to do. So I don't want to have to go on the road, because
this conversation being the exception, right?
This conversation being the exception.
Okay, sorry.
I was like, oh God, I got to talk to these guys for an hour. I'm like, I got 15 minutes. Can we do it in 15 minute. Never mind.
What were you
Zack's
saying?
A talker,
I'm sorry,
so
Zack.
we got to do an hour. As I'm talking. But not having I didn't want to be in a situation where I had to take a gig on the road because I needed the money. I didn't have to not go, or I don't have to miss dinner with friends who are in town because I have to play some gig that I don't want to play on a Friday night for $50 because I need the money.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to be in that situation. And I'll play a $50 gig all night. I don't care about that, but I don't want the money to control my life. So if I can figure out a way to make money other ways, Drummer's Resource, then if someone says, hey, do you want to do this gig? My wife and I are going out to dinner that night, and I'd rather go do that than go make $50 at this gig. No, you know what? I've got plans. I'm good. Yeah. But if I didn't have any money, I got to take that gig. Or I got to take that tour with that guitar player that I don't want to play with, but I need the money and bills are due, so I have to take that. And I never wanted to be in that situation. I refuse to be in that situation. So it comes down to being selective and having the freedom to be able to do what you want to do.
Yeah, Matt, how is that translating to you? Are you in like say yes to every gig mode, or are you being more selective?
I'm not being more selective. I haven't. Well, I have had some things, but so far they've all been good. I don't think that I've been as selective in the past, and there are definitely times that I find myself in bad situations and taking gigs and being too busy to do the other gig that I wish I was doing or whatever. And
to be clear, when I was building Drummer's Resource, I did a lot of stuff that I didn't want to do.
That's on the internet too, man.
To get to the point of being able to be selective. It's sort of like, slumming it for a couple of years to be able to put yourself in the position. It's just like anything. It's like starting a business, or that was starting a business. But like for Matt, I would imagine that Matt, you're sort of like, I need to sort of be a little less selective because I'm trying to get this ball rolling again.
Yeah,
in the city, and then it'll get you to a point where you're like, okay, now I can be more selective and have more control.
So today, I've got a gig this afternoon downtown on Broadway, which I've had lots of good experiences there. I've had lots of bad experiences there, and I've never made it a full-time thing. There are many people that go down there and work full-time there. It's a scene. It's one of the many scenes within the scene of Nashville. There's multiple scenes. This place is saturated with musicians, and the whole music business. So it's the thing I don't want to fall into is I don't want that to become my scene. The one scene. I see great players down there just that are miserable. that should be doing many things. I'd like to use it as a piece of the puzzle if I'm able to. And I think because I'm opening myself up to non-music other opportunities, other gigs, and I think the podcast is another one of those things. It's just another avenue of how to participate in the music business in a non-playing way. And teaching is another thing. I haven't really gone down that route, but the air gigs is another thing that I'm excited about. So it's allowing me to be more selective. But I think I was in panic mode for so many years to take everything I could. And I was really fortunate to find myself in lots of great situations. But I'll tell you, I have a friend of mine, I'll tell you real quick, when I first moved to town and I was working part-time at Gary Forkham's, working at Forks. And I was also, for a year, I worked stocking shelves at a grocery store. And it was like this really cool organic grocery store, and all these songwriters would come in and eat lunch there. It was like a world market kind of thing. And I just felt like just such a goof with my apron, and I'm like, this is not cool. And my friend said to me, he goes, you know what? He goes, you're so driven to make it in this business that you will take this job to support your family. My first son was born, so that you have. I mean, I've got a degree in music business. You know, you could go get that other job, but you're making yourself available by working this other job, and that was the boost that I need to stay with it. And then all of a sudden, the audition came to leave that job for a playing gig, and that kind of started my full-time playing career because I had that job, because I wasn't stuck in a whatever type situation. So that helped me get started. So it's difficult to know, but I feel like now's my opportunity. But there was no but about it. I have greater expenses at this stage in my life.
Sure.
And so my wife has a wonderful job working for a nonprofit here in Nashville, but it doesn't pay really well. I have to kind of make sure that I'm bringing to the table what I can. So that means that I want to be selective about what I'm doing, but I really have to pay attention on the goal. And for me, what I'm doing in my life right now is just being focused on family in that way, so that if I can do music, man, I'm gonna work hard at it. And so far, the last 3 weeks since I've left my road gig, if things keep going this way, I think I'll be able to do it.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. I think you've obviously got a ton of talent, and from what I can tell, you have a lot of goodwill in Nashville. And I think the scene is gonna rally around you and get you going.
I hope so. And it's the Southeast, and people are super nice. Whether they mean it or not is another thing. But,
what's the thing they said? The biggest insult is when someone says, "Aren't you precious?"
No, bless your heart.
Bless your heart in the South, right?
Yeah,
yeah. Bless your heart. Yeah.
I'm also curious, Matt, about you're re-entering the Nashville scene. Is it a different scene than you first entered?
In some ways, yeah. It's like I see different people. There's been a lot of young players that have come into town and reestablished relationships with bands and musicians that I was the guy for, know, and so I kind of have to get back in line in some ways. But I'm still learning. And I know I keep bringing this up, but through the podcast, I've met a bunch of people that I didn't know that have been here as long as I have. Right. So I think it's how far this scene here is so deep, and there's so many scenes within the scene and circles that intersect, and some do and some don't, that you could, it's almost like living on Long Island. You never have to leave. You live there your whole life, and that could be your world. There's different scenes like that here too. So I don't know, man.
The one thing that you said that stuck out was like, all right, I'm focused on spending time with my family, on being home, on really making that a priority. And there's something about making that choice. There's something about having control of that choice. It sort of reminds me of, do you know Neil Strauss, the author?
I don't.
No.
So he's a New York Times bestselling author. He's written a bunch of different books, and he was going bald and he shaved his head. And he said, going bald is not a choice, but shaving your head is.
Yeah.
And the fact that he was like, I didn't want to be bald, but by electing to shave my head, now it becomes a choice. Now it becomes a decision that I've made. So it's one thing if you're forced to stay home and because like you quote unquote couldn't make it on the road. Mm-hmm. It's another to say, I'm going to make the choice to stay home because I want to be here with my family, and I'm going to figure everything else out around it. I think that is such a powerful mind shift thing that happens, that now you're in control, and it's something that's not controlling you. And that for me is the ultimate thing. I said it before, but it all comes down to freedom and choice and decision. And when you have control over that, then like, man, how life doesn't get any better than that.
You're right.
Preach.
Yeah, you're right, man.
That's what I think.
Yeah. I don't know. Listen,
maybe I'm wrong, but
It is empowering because I think there is a lot of pressure, even internally, that we struggle with, like how we are perceived in our industry with social media and all the stuff that we've grown up on, looking up to our heroes and seeing our peers do different things. And we're like, oh, that's cool. Look at that Serena gig. Look what he's doing, or look who he did the session with. Or, I heard him on the radio when I was in Kroger or whatever, and it's like, oh my gosh, what am I doing? It's like, how can I don't want to let anybody know that I'm doing this part-time painting job or whatever. And it's like, you know what? I just don't give a shit anymore, man.
Yeah.
Because one of the things when I made the announcement on Facebook that I was leaving this gig and I wish these guys well and all this stuff, and it's time to refocus on family, every comment was like, awesome, man, good for you. And it was an empowering thing because I struggled with that perception thing, like you said, Nick. And and that's no longer a thing.
We all do.
Yeah. I hate that.
Something
especially in the podcast, it's like we have all these listeners, and even for a while for me, I was like scared to show one side of me that I was like, oh, maybe they'll think less of me or whatever. And then I don't know, I think the moment that I started being a lot more, I don't want to say more honest, because I've always been honest with the audience, but like being less selective about what they see and hear, and just being like, hey man, this is the reality of, this is life. This is what it is. I think that struck a chord with my audience too.
I think so. People appreciate that. And
it's like, oh shit, you struggle with this thing. It's like, yeah, I do. Like I still watch, I still watch, I don't know,
The Bachelor.
Bernard Purdie play and like want to go lock myself in a closet and never come out. Like, yeah, of course. Like, we all have that.
Yeah, and comparing yourself to whoever else, and it's something we all do. It's something we're all guilty of. But Nick, a while back, you interviewed Michael Carvin, and I got to study with him a bit when I was in Kansas City. And I was having this kind of conversation with him about there was another drummer in Kansas City who was, doing a lot of cool shit, and I was just feeling insecure about it. And Michael Carvin was like, man, fuck him. It ain't none of your business.
Yeah. That's definitely a Michael Carvin quote.
Yeah. But like the notion that whatever whatever anybody else is doing in their career is none of your business.
Right.
Because we can tell ourselves like, oh, we shouldn't let it affect us. It's, we're on our own path and blah, blah. But like Carvin just said, it's none of your business. And it's kind of easier said than done, but putting it in those terms is like, you can choose to pay attention to it or not.
Right. Gerald Hayward, I had on the podcast too. And he said, I've done all these tours and played in all these stadiums and played with all of these people. And I did that because that's what I was supposed to do. But not everybody's supposed to do that.
Yeah. And
thinking that everyone is supposed to do that and trying to live by that standard, he was like, it's going to kill you. Like I did it. I didn't, it just happened. That naturally was how it progressed. And the things where you're naturally progressing to, those are the things that you should be doing. If it's this uphill battle every time you turn around, he's like, maybe you need to take a look at it and wonder if this is the right path for you or not. Not that it won't be hard, but like if it just seems like one way just makes sense to you, and like for me, like business just makes sense to me. It's just easy for me. It's not easy for me, but it just makes sense. But other things that I've tried to do, it's always a struggle. I never felt like I was good at it. I never, it's like, okay, maybe that's not the right path then.
Yeah.
Right. And I think people get caught up to like, going back to what we talked about a little bit, but like, oh, if I'm not playing in stadiums, then, I didn't make it. But I'd much rather be, a Chad Smith where I'm a member of the band playing in that band versus a hired gun on the road that, you go out on the road, you make, maybe we shouldn't get into money, but you're not making that much money on the road. But the lead singer of the band is coming home and he has $5 million more in his pocket.
Right.
And especially like the Nashville cats, like those guys are not crushing it like everybody thinks they are.
Yeah, it's a different situation, and country doesn't get the love that I think a lot of other scenes, as far as those who are supporting the artists. I mean, you are very low on the totem pole. You have the singer or quote unquote artist, and then you have management, and you have artist development, and you have the studio, and you have all these people, and then you have the touring band. Now those lines are getting blurred more and more, which is really great, but you are so replaceable and so disposable. So you have to be very humble. But going back to what you said, I think there is a breed of people out there that not cultivating relationships, not having a family, or having that certain amount of stability that I think a lot of us enjoy, and like, and that is a part of the equation and makeup of happiness in our life. There is a breed of people that's all they want to do, and that's how they see themselves for the rest of their life.
I don't know too many people who successfully have done that, like been on, maintained a family life on the road. You know what the difference maker I've always seen is sidemen versus members of the bands.
In what way?
Because it seems like the guys who are in the bands, who own part of the bands, who are making a lot more money, it's easier for them to fly home. It's easier, for them to fly their family out to hang out with them. Yeah. It's easier for them to send money home. Like it's a lot easier for me to be away from home when my wife's getting a check for $1 million a week. Right. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
Or maybe not $1 million a week, but you know what I mean. But it makes it's a lot easier than, they can pay for daycare. They can. I mean, money makes things easier. Let's not mince words here.
Right. And I can tell you that as I was in this group for a long time, I mean, I was kind of the hired gun, but I had more and more of a say as the years went on. In the last year and a half, all but the singer and I, all the members left for one reason or another. So I had even more say, and I was participating, and I could bring my family on the road. I could if I wanted to, but there was stuff that was going on it's like my wife had to work, my kids had to go to school. They couldn't leave, and the singer who,
But what I'm saying, like if you're Chad Smith, your wife doesn't have to work.
Right, but how many Chad Smiths are there?
Right. No, the only thing that I was saying was the difference of guys who who can maintain that relationship. I think that the money goes a long way. That's all I was saying by that.
For sure.
So I think it's harder for us normal people.
Right. Well, and there's all those,
definitely not normal, but
I love the Foo Fighters documentary, and they're in the studio, and there's all the kids running around and stuff like that. I'm like, well, what a perfect balance! That looks incredible.
You see when Dave Grohl's like standing outside of the studio, and the guy walks by, and he's like, "Oh my God, you're Dave Grohl!" Like he's like, "My son is a huge fan of yours," and he goes to the son. He's like, "You want to come in and watch us make a record?" And he just like brings him inside and lets him watch the recording.
Yeah. I remember the Foo Fighters were on Letterman one time. They were on a few times, but one time Dave Grohl actually did panel with Letterman, and Letterman was like, "So you brought your kids with you this time?" And Grohl was like, "Yeah, they're backstage, man. They can destroy a dressing room like Van Halen wished."
That's great. He's good people, man. He's good to have in this business.
Yeah.
Nick, thanks for doing this, man. This is
thanks
fun,
for having me.
And I think we should do it again.
We should. We should.
At some point, and just kind of have it's just, I feel like we've touched on one thing and really worn it out.
I feel like we can. I want to check in with you guys in a year, because like I'm a year plus into my Atlanta transition, and things are going well. So in a year from now, I want to hear about Nick in San Francisco and Matt in Nashville.
Yeah,
okay,
we should do that. We should like put it on the calendar now to remind ourselves. You know, like, okay, we did this in February. Let's do it next February.
Yeah.
Here's a preview.
I'll be crying the blues. And
I know, no, that's gonna be my preview.
Nobody's hiring me.
Fuck, man. My house is gone. All right,
so
dudes.
I started a blues band.
Yeah. And now we're making millions.
Yeah.
And my wife wants to come back. Got my dog back. Oh no, that's a country song. Sorry. All right, guys. I'm gonna jet, but good talking to you.
All right.
Shout
good to talk to you guys.
You too.
See ya.
All right. Talk to you later, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
See you.
So my thanks goes to Nick Ruffini for taking some time to talk to Zack and I. He's been a good resource, again, for this podcast, and I appreciate him. That conversation was a lot of fun, and I think it would be interesting to check in again, the three of us, to see where we're at, maybe in a year, maybe in 6 months or so, and see what's been going on. We've got some exciting things coming up in the coming months that we'll keep you posted about, that involves you and participating with some things that we are trying to develop this year in 2017. My thanks, as always, goes to Mike Jackson for his technical assistance. Stay tuned next week for Zack Albetta's interviews. I want to take 2 seconds real quick and just talk a little bit about how we digest these podcasts. We have all different ways of doing it. I hear people say that, hey, when I mow my lawn, I'm listening. When I'm driving to work, I'm listening. When I go to the gym, I'm listening. I caught part of this, and then I had to go to class, and then I picked up where I left off. There's many different ways to listen to these podcasts. The beautiful thing is, regardless of how long they are, you can pause. You can come back and pick up where you left off. So that's what's unique about these. But again, thanks for everyone's support and listening, and I hope to see you around. Bye-bye.